These children are travelling between islands for school in the Torres Strait. They're obviously too young to vote.
What they're voting about is whether to recognise us, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, as the first peoples of Australia. Now, do you think they should say yes or no? What do you say?
But Noel Pearson wants them to understand what the coming referendum could mean for their futures.
What if it doesn't happen?
What if they don't listen? We've just got to be smart. We've got to be organised. We've got to have really good arguments. Anything that's affecting our culture, that's affecting our land rights.
Pearson has crisscrossed the country in the last few months, campaigning relentlessly for a yes vote.
Thank you. How are you, darling? You've been good?
There aren't many voters in the remote Torres Strait communities like Wyburn, but this is a place of great significance in the history of Indigenous empowerment.
What we're doing here is building on that foundation, that the Murray Islanders laid the foundation stone for justice and recognition.
This is the land of Eddie Koiki Mabo, whose campaign led to the momentous High Court decision that recognised Indigenous land rights in 1993.
I met Old Man Koiki when I was a young man, 25 years old. And everybody thought the native title claim was never going to get anywhere.
Like Pearson, some of the people here have direct connections to the great man.
We need strong voice like us. I'm one of the fighter. I can fight like my father, Koiki.
Betty Mabo is Eddie Mabo's adopted daughter.
And fight with the government, with the court and speak. Why my people? He treated separate from the rest of Australia. And I can tell you...
Abigail Harry is a senior woman.
So this is a very big thing, it's a change for us. And I'm glad that I live to see it. I live to see it. Praise God, praise God. Because, you know, this is for the next generation. So go home, tell your family to vote yes, and be part of this change. This is a very big change.
2011? Yeah. And then I spoke to her at the...
Pearson wants to show us a special place, an uninhabited island, 45 minutes from the regional centre of the Torres Strait. We're coming up on Badenoch Island, called Possession Island on the map. The clue is there in the name. This is one of the places where Captain Cook staked a claim of possession on behalf of the British Crown. He was supposed to do so with the consent of the locals. He didn't. The failure to recognise the local people then or since is part of what Noel Pearson calls the rift in our national soul, which he hopes the Voice referendum next week will start to knit back together. Milton Savage is a traditional owner of the island.
This is kind of, in one sense, ground zero, Possession Island. This is the place he planted the flag. And so it's of huge political significance in this Yes campaign. The effect of what he did here and claiming possession on behalf of the British Crown, it didn't have a legal effect, it was a political act on behalf of the British Empire. He did not gain the consent of the natives, and all of the history that we're trying to come to terms with now flowed from this act.
What you call the Great Rift in the nation.
Absolutely.
In this remote place, with its past pulling at the threads of our national story, we sat down for our last conversation before the referendum on Saturday. Noel Pearson, normally I start my interviews for 7:30 by saying welcome to the programme, but in this case I was welcomed here by one of the traditional owners of this island. So through you to him, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
You said this about constitutional recognition, that Australia doesn't make sense without it. It's a rift in our national soul. Why wasn't a simple yes or no question on constitutional recognition sufficient for you?
Because recognition needed to be substantive. This was our country. We needed a substantive place in this country, and we had a range of choices in relation to what form of recognition we achieved in this referendum, and the Indigenous people gathered at Uluru decided recognition of a voice to the Parliament would be the appropriate form of recognition so that we could have a say to the Parliament and the government about matters affecting our people.
Why do you think the voice as a form of recognition will do that thing you want, heal the rift in our soul?
Well, the exclusion of Indigenous people from the original Constitution was on the basis of the fact that the country had decided we weren't important enough to be part of the nation. We were not citizens of the new Commonwealth. We have an opportunity now to close that exclusion and to recognise that Australia has a history that precedes the English colonial settlement of Australia.
One of the biggest criticisms from Peter Dutton is that the voice will cause chaos in government. Chief Justice French has been talking about that, saying the voice should be restricted in who it can speak to. Is that enough to combat Peter Dutton's criticisms?
Oh, it
the
can't
business
disrupt.
of government.
The government and the Parliament cannot be slowed down by the voice. If you want to have a say about legislation, get your voice in early. You've got to play according to the political process. It's like if the miners or the farmers or the human rights advocates or the environmentalists, if you want to get into the cycle of the Parliament, to get into their ears, you have to be adroit, you have to be timely, because the Parliament's not going to slow down for you. The Parliament clock operates according to its own rules. The voice can't change that.
So you reject Peter Dutton's description of it as something that would disrupt the business of the nation?
Absolutely, and I think the Leader of the Opposition knows the true answer to that question.
You spent a long time working with constitutional conservatives drafting the voice. Why then has the proposal for the voice not cut through with Conservative Australia?
They walked away. I haven't done a list of all of the politicians that I've spoken to from the Conservative side of politics prior to the last federal election who supported the voice. But it runs into the dozens, including a majority of the National Party. It was in fact Treasurer Josh Frydenberg. When I spoke to him, I said, well, what should I do, Josh? Josh said, talk to all the party members. So I organised Zooms. It went on for weeks, in fact months, before I got through with a conversation for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour conversation with each of those politicians on the Conservative side who would take a meeting with me, and there were a majority of them, and so many of them were supportive. I can tell you some of the people campaigning now against the voice were supportive of the voice when I spoke to them prior to the last federal election.
So what does that tell you?
That tells me that there was a change of government last year, May. That was decisive.
Given all the battles you fought over so many years, did you anticipate that the biggest challenge would come from the no side's Indigenous leaders?
That was not fully in view. I knew that Jacinta would be a very compelling, the leader of the Indigenous spokesman for the opposition. I knew that she would be a compelling figure. I'd witnessed her interventions on Indigenous policy in the years prior. I'd attended events with her. You know, I attended school education events, Indigenous education events with her. I'd campaigned with her to preserve income management. But I knew that whatever position she took, it would be decisive, it would be impactful, but I didn't know what position she would take. And so it was with great regret and that I witnessed her come out so strongly against the Voice, and that, you know, she took the National Party with her.
Yep.
And eventually took the Liberal Party with her.
How do you respond to Jacinta Price's assertion that there have been no negative effects from colonisation?
Oh, that's just deliberate controversy bomb. You know, I really struggle to believe she believes that. But it's the usual kind of right-wing tactic of chucking an outrageous statement out there that nobody believes in. I don't think she would believe in it. It's just a provocation.
There's been a lot of different sorts of criticism of the Voice, but the most important one boils down to the allegation that it's going to separate Indigenous people from the rest of the population.
In fact, it's an act of integration. It's integrating Indigenous people into the Constitution. At the moment, we're left out. That's separatism. And on the other side, they want us to completely ignore anything that might be rightful or special about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, their culture, their relationship with the land, their heritage, their languages. You know, they want us to ignore that. So on the one hand, there's the kind of whitewash it and assimilate, and on the other hand, there's the stay out of the Constitution kind of leftist separatism. The middle position we're advocating is integration. We want in to the Australian Constitution.
How did we arrive at a situation where some of Australia's Indigenous leaders are more conservative on race than John Howard?
I don't know how that's happened, because if you read John Howard from 2007, he is all about recognising the special but not separate place. That's the middle position. There's no special place over here on the right. There's a separate place over here on the left. What's in the middle is the position that John Howard articulated in 2007, special but not separate.
We're on Possession Island, where we've been talking about sovereignty. If the referendum fails, is moving to a treaty the next step?
Well, that has always been the agenda of Indigenous people. They want to negotiate a settlement. John Howard's words were actually not treaty, but settlement. A settlement of this issue about the place of Indigenous people in this country.
And you personally now, can you take another repudiation?
Oh, my concern is not for myself personally. My concern is for having led my people to trust in the Australian people. And if that trust is not repaid, then I feel I'm a bit accountable for that. I'm going to have to account for that to my people, because I've asked them to trust in the system, to trust in this process, to put the work into this process, to put their faith in the Australian people. And if that doesn't pay out, then I'm going to have to front up and I'll have to have some kind of words for people who have been so stalwart, so faithful, and who have invested so much hope into this possibility that it's almost impossible for me to work out what I can say to them.
Noel Pearson, thank you.
Thank you.